Welcome back, everyone. Today we are diving into an explainer on a topic that is highly requested, heavily misunderstood, and honestly, just totally fascinating when you get into the nuts and bolts of it. We're looking at a step-by-step guide for structural wall removal. Now, if you've ever stared down a wall in your home and thought, man, I would just love to open this space up, well, stick around. We're going to completely demystify the complex engineering process required to actually pull that off safely.
It's a pretty compelling question, isn't it? Want to tear down a wall for that gorgeous, airy, open concept space? Now, I gotta say, reality TV renovation shows have kind of done us a huge disservice here. You know the drill. They show a host swinging a sledgehammer, drywall goes flying everywhere, everyone cheers, and commercial break. But the reality? The actual methodical science and planning required to do this right without, compromising the literal integrity of your entire house? It's a completely different story. It is a precise, calculated engineering feat. So today, we're going to uncover exactly how the pros actually pull this off.
So here is our roadmap for this whole project. We've got 1. Planning and engineering. 2. Permits and preparation. 3. Temporary structural supports. 4. Demolition and installation. And finally, 5. Inspections and completion.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Planning and Engineering. This is the absolutely crucial first step.
Because here's the thing. A successful removal always begins at a desk, not a demolition site. The structural engineer's duties here are incredibly rigorous. Step 1, they've got to calculate the roof and floor loads. Basically, they need to know exactly how much weight that existing wall is currently holding up. Step 2, they design the replacement beam. Depending on the load, this could be a steel universal beam, maybe a parallel flange channel, or sometimes an engineered LVL wood beam. Step 3, they specify the columns and footings required to hold up that brand new beam. And finally, Step 4, they prepare the certified structural drawings. Because listen, every single ounce of weight has to have a clearly designated load path straight down to the foundation.
And I think this just brilliantly illustrates the difference between how we see our homes and how an engineer sees them. If you look at a standard homeowner's floor plan, it shows where the couch goes, where the kitchen island sits. It's an artistic rendering. But compare that to a highly technical, ultra-precise engineering drawing. Just look at the math there, the exact measurements, the specific weld points, the connection details. That engineering side is exactly what guarantees your roof won't sag right into your living room once that wall is gone.
Moving right along to Section 2, Permits and Preparation. It's time to get ready to build.
So with the math dialed in and those permits finally stamped, site preparation begins. Now let me make this crystal clear right now. No structural work can legally or safely commence without building permits, surveyor sign-offs, and engineer approvals actually in hand. But once that is all settled, just look at the sheer scale of this massive plastic dust barrier cube. They have completely isolated the work zone, protecting the flooring, moving the furniture out, disconnecting all those hidden services like gas, plumbing, and electrical that might be lurking inside the wall. All of this happens before a single speck of dust actually flies. It's all about creating a completely safe, controlled environment.
Which brings us to Section 3, Temporary Structural Supports, or as I like to call it, securing the load.
This is the real high-stakes physical phase of temporarily holding up the whole house while the permanent supports are being swapped out. So the absolute golden rule here, and this is pulled straight from our source material, is this. The wall must never be removed before temporary supports are installed. I really want to emphasize that. This isn't just a friendly suggestion. This is a matter of pure gravity and life safety. You literally can't take away a load-bearing structure until an alternative support system is already carrying that weight, no exceptions.
So to safely transfer those super heavy roof and floor loads, the industry relies on a very specific arsenal of temporary hardware. The typical supports you're going to see include acro props, timber strongbacks, temporary stud walls, and steel shoring. These elements basically step in to play the hero. They act as a physical safety net that takes on thousands of pounds of pressure so that the existing wall can be safely extracted.
Let's take a look at exactly how this functions in a real space. You can clearly see the acro props here. They're those adjustable vertical steel poles holding up the ceiling loads on either side of that beautiful raw exposed brick. And right above them, that massive red steel beam has been carefully maneuvered into place. These props are essentially what make the entire operation possible, holding the house rock steady while all the heavy lifting happens.
Let's move to another angle and see how this looks in a different context. Here, we're seeing active site supports using steel props combined with horizontal timbers running right across the ceiling joists. This is actually what engineers refer to as timber strongbacks. What they do is distribute the pinpoint load of those steel props across multiple ceiling joists above. This ensures that the temporary weight doesn't just, punch a hole right through the ceiling. It is a highly strategic, super carefully placed physical safety net.
All right, Section 4, Demolition and Installation. It is finally time for Out with the Old.
With our safety net firmly in place, the tension definitely builds as the old structure is finally torn down and those heavy-duty beams are permanently installed. But actually, even the demolition part is highly methodical. It's a very exact four-step sequence. First, the workers carefully remove the plasterboard just to expose the bones of the wall. Second, they finalize the disconnection of any of those internal surfaces we talked about. Third, they remove the actual framing studs or the masonry brickwork. And finally, fourth, they remove the top plate or the lintel. And hey, remember our golden rule? Those temporary supports remain firmly in place throughout every single one of these steps.
This part of the process perfectly captures the intensity of the job. We've got workers safely using a jackhammer to demolish the remaining masonry. But look right above their heads. The massive structural load is already fully secured by those overhead steel beams. They can work confidently and, more importantly, safely down below because the engineering was done correctly back in Phase 1 and those temporary supports were placed perfectly in Phase 3.
So following the demolition, the new vertical supports have to be locked in. In a lot of cases, new structural columns, kind of like the massive steel one you see right here, must be precisely installed. Notice how it's sitting on a freshly poured and cured concrete footing, which was specifically excavated just for this purpose. The column is then rigidly secured using these heavy-duty hold-down bolts, or sometimes chemical anchors, right through a base plate. This right here is exactly what transfers the new beam's weight securely into the earth.
And that brings us to our final stretch, Section 5, Inspections and Completion.
All the heavy lifting is finally done, the new steel is in place. But hold on, before we can actually celebrate, the work has to be rigorously validated by the experts. The structural inspector is going to arrive on site with a mandatory, totally non-negotiable checklist. First, they are going to verify that the exact beam size matches the engineering drawings. Then they'll check the bearing length, which basically means how much of the beam is actually resting on the supports. They are going to scrutinize every single bolted connection, bearing plate, and weld. And of course, they will inspect those new footings. All of this has to happen before any of that temporary safety equipment is even allowed to be touched.
Because only after passing that super strict inspection can the temporary props finally be addressed. And no, they aren't just knocked out of there with a hammer. As you can probably imagine, they are gradually, incredibly carefully backed off. The team is constantly monitoring the structure as the weight transfers from the temporary props over to the new permanent beam. They are looking to confirm that there is absolutely zero structural movement.
Once the structure is completely stable and happily holding its own weight, well, it's the final sprint to the finish line. The team goes in and reinstates the electrical, plumbing, and HVAC services that had to be disconnected earlier. They complete all the finishing works, patching up the flooring, installing bulkheads around the new beam, getting the painting done. And the very last steps are the final building surveyor inspection, the ultimate structural sign-off, and the client handover. That dream open concept space, it is finally a reality.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Are you ready to tackle your renovation by the book? Because honestly, after walking through these 14 steps, it kind of changes how you look at buildings, doesn't it? The next time you walk into a beautiful, sprawling, open concept home, ask yourself, what invisible, engineered safety nets are hiding right above your head? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer.